Argument from natural beauty. From early on, Lewis's pessimistic view of nature as cruel and wasteful was balanced by the longings nature stirred within him. For Lewis, our experience of beauty in nature pointed to the reality of something beyond nature. Atoms dead could never thus stir the human heart of us, unless the beauty that we see, the veil of endless beauty be. In Lewis's view, the longings provoked by earthly beauty could not be accounted for by a blind and mechanical universe. They required a transcendent cause outside of nature. This cause was not necessarily personal, but it did go beyond undirected matter and energy. As a consequence, it put intelligent design back on the table as one of the options for discussion.
The argument from reason is just the argument that in a naturalistic worldview, reason isn't going to fit. Because in the last analysis, everybody's thoughts are going to be the result of non-rational causes. You're basically trying to say that human reasoning, the very kind of reasoning that produced the origin of species, that produced Einstein's theory of relativity, that adds, subtracts, divides numbers, and so forth. What you're saying is all of that is ultimately the product of irrational causes, non-rational causes. That is an incoherent position, okay? Because it says that somehow you can derive intelligence from that which is not intelligent.
Argument from functional complexity.
According to Lewis, modern science, especially Darwinian biology, has schooled us to think that crude and simple things in nature naturally develop into more complex and sophisticated things. The acorn turns into the oak tree. The egg turns into the owl. The human embryo turns into a full-fledged human being. Sometimes evolutionists even point to technological development as an example of this same process. The early locomotive engine supposedly evolved into the much more complicated modern train engine. Or the simple boat evolved into the steamship or passenger ship. Lewis called this evolutionary view an optical illusion. What we really see in nature, according to Lewis, is simpler and less functional things habitually springing from things that are more complex and functional. If anything, it's a process of devolution, not evolution. Every acorn originally drops from a fully developed oak tree. Every owl's egg comes from a fully developed owl. Every human embryo requires two fully developed human parents. The same is true with technological evolution. The modern train engine didn't simply magically evolve from a simpler train engine, according to Lewis. It sprang from something far greater, the mind of man. And Lewis thought that just like we have to go outside the physical sequence of train engines to find the originator of the engines, we need to go outside the ordinary course of nature to find the originator of nature, the intelligent designer. Lewis's argument from functional complexity is an explicit argument for intelligent design.
Lewis's argument from functional complexity was based on his belief that an effect could not be greater than its original cause. Put another way, a copy could not be better than the original. This was a Platonic idea that Lewis found in medieval writers, such as Boethius.
Now, what is the argument I want to talk to you about? The argument is basically the argument of morality. Now, the argument is basically the moral argument. Now, what is the moral argument? The moral argument is this, basically. I'm going to give you the argument itself first, and then we'll break it down, inshallah. So the argument is as follows. If God does not exist, then objective moral values and duties do not exist. That's premise one. Objective moral values and duties do exist. That's premise two. In conclusion, God exists. Now let's break down these premises and let me show you why this argument is so powerful, inshallah. Now let's look at the first premise, right? If God does not exist, then objective moral values and duties do not exist. Now, what do I mean by objective morality? Let me clarify this first, inshallah, because once we understand this, then the argument makes sense. Now, when we say something is objectively moral or objectively right and wrong, what we're saying is that even though if the social consensus, if everyone's subjective opinion was that killing an innocent child is right, it will still be objectively wrong. So when we say something is objectively wrong or right, it's independent of human subjectivity, independent of what people think. It's absolutely right or wrong, right? So this is the point. Now, what's the first premise? If God does not exist, then objective moral values and duties do not exist, right? And what do we mean by this? What we're saying basically is, if you take God out of the picture, if you say God does not exist, then you can't claim anything to be objectively right or wrong, right? Let's think about this. What else do we have to peg morality, objective morality on in the absence of God? All you have is either, number one, social pressure, or two, evolution, right? Now let's look at both of these. What happens if you peg morality on social pressure, right? So what we're saying is, if a group of people gets together and says something is wrong or something is right, then it's objectively wrong or right. This isn't the case, because there's been groups of people in history and even till this very day who think something is right and should be done, but it's wrong. Take Hitler and his example in Nazi Germany. It was a social consensus amongst a group of people to do something which was incorrect. So we can see from this that if you say that it's about social consensus, then this renders morality subjective or relative at best. You can't claim it's objective anymore, because you may have two groups of people which have two different opinions on what is right and what is wrong. Who's right? Who's objectively right? You can't say. Okay, now let's look at the second possibility. The second option you have to peg morality on is evolution, right? And this doesn't work either. This too renders morality subjective and relative at best, because why? Let's think about this. If you're saying moral values and duties evolved, just like our fingernails, hands and teeth have, then they'll continue to evolve. They're just a random accidental byproduct. That's it. There's nothing to them. There's no substance to them. They're just like we as human beings, according to the naturalists, the atheists, have evolved with no purpose by an accidental process, so have our moral values and duties. Now, if this is the case, then morality is nothing but subjective again, which will continue to evolve. So what does this show us? Social pressure doesn't work. Evolution doesn't work. Therefore, if you deny God, you're denying objective moral values and duties. You can't claim that something is objectively right or wrong if you deny God. It's that simple. Premise 2, therefore, objective moral values and duties do exist. If this is the case, then God exists. You can't deny God. God must exist, because God is the only transcendental anchor that you can anchor objective moral values and duties on, right? Because God is above and beyond the human subjectivity, and there is nothing else that you can peg objective moral values and duties to. Now, inshallah, I hope this is clear. So now the question is morality objective? Can we have objective right and wrong? If the answer is yes, then God exists. If the answer is no, then God does not exist. Or you can claim that God does not exist. Now let's look at this. Can we claim that morality is not objective? Can we even claim such a thing? Because think about it. Some atheists at this point, what they would do is they say, well, morality is not objective. It's just subjective. Well, this is such a sad position to hold. I mean, give them a scenario. Give this scenario next time someone says this to you, right? Tell them, look, if you were walking down a quiet road one day and you came across an alley and you started to walk down this alley, and as you were walking down, you saw a man about to kill an innocent child for no reason. What would you do? You can't stop him. You can't condemn him. If you claim morality is subjective, what are you going to say? Don't kill him. And if he turns around and says, why not? And all you can say is, well, I feel like it's wrong, so don't kill him. He can just turn around and say, well, I feel like it's right, so I'm going to kill him. Do you see? It's a crude example, but it puts things into perspective. If you claim morality is just subjective, then it's a very, very sad position to hold. You can't condemn anyone for anything. Now, I hope this is clear. Therefore, we know objective morality exists. Therefore, God exists in conclusion. And this is a very, very powerful argument which proves the existence of God.
In fact, Dawkins himself seems to be committed to the truth of both premises. With respect to premise 1, that if God does not exist, objective moral values and duties do not exist, Dawkins informs us, and I quote, "There is at bottom no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but pitiless indifference. We are machines for propagating DNA It is every living object's sole reason for being, end quote. But although he says that there is no evil, no good, nothing but pitiless indifference, the fact is that Richard Dawkins is a stubborn moralist. He vigorously condemns such actions as the harassment and abuse of homosexuals, the religious indoctrination of children, the Incan practice of human sacrifice, and prizing cultural diversity over the interests of Amish children. He even goes so far as to offer his own amended 10 Commandments for guiding moral behavior, all the while marvelously oblivious to the contradiction with his ethical subjectivism. Thus, affirming both premises of the moral argument, Dawkins is, on pain of irrationality, committed to the argument's conclusion, namely that God exists.
So I don't see, what are you so afraid of?
Do you lock your door at night?
Yeah. Sure.
The other point you made about voluntary euthanasia and homosexuality, again, value claims and moral judgments about certain things. You presume them as if they're objective in nature in the humanistic perspective, which there's even difference of opinion amongst humanists and atheist scholars with regards to euthanasia and things like abortion and other things like homosexuality. And I would argue, where is your standard? You don't even have a standard. How can you come here and just say these things are right and wrong when you don't even have a standard? I don't tell you. Without God, your morality is meaningless. It's ephemeral. It's like the lion when he rips the blood, he rips the neck of a deer and drinks its blood. We don't say, hey, that lion is acting immorally. No!